Welcome back to another episode of the Coffee, Commerce, and Catechesis podcast. Join us on our journey to learn more about the Christian faith and how we can live it out in our modern world. If we believe something, it should be because it's true. There is a very real poison in our culture today. Has it hit its peak, or are they just getting started? Our guest today, Dr. Matthew Petrusek, calls it the Frankenstein of political ideologies and is here to share his insights. But first, a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Rerum Novarum Partners, a business advisory, strategy, and finance firm operated by and for committed Catholic Christians who desire to faithfully follow Jesus Christ, emulate the saints, serve others, and give glory to God through business activities. Rerum Novarum Partners offers business guidance, strategic direction, and assistance raising capital to Catholic startups and small businesses, founders, and managers while adhering to the Catholic Church's magisterial teachings and traditional Christian values. You can live a committed Catholic life and achieve business success at the same time. Visit www.rerumnovarumpartners.com to learn more, and we'll include a link in the show notes as well. Over to you, Travis.
Thanks, Rigel, and thanks everyone for tuning in for another episode of Coffee, Commerce, and Catechesis. Some questions for us to think about as we start this episode. Is the progressivist, woke worldview logically coherent? Is it understandable? Is it justifiable? Well, in a 2022 article for Word on Fire, our guest, Dr. Matthew Petrusek, wrote as follows: Progressivism, or wokeism, adds moral insult to injury by affirming that there is no such thing as universal moral values, while insisting that progressivism or wokeism is morally superior to all competing worldviews. This is indistinguishable from declaring, we believe what we believe because we believe it, and you must believe it too, or else. Matthew Petrusek is the Senior Director of the Word on Fire Institute and its Professor of Catholic Ethics. He has authored and edited several books and lectures broadly in both English and Spanish on moral philosophy, theology, politics, social issues, and the Catholic intellectual tradition. He received a Master of Arts from Yale University and a PhD from the University of Chicago, and he lives with his wife and children in southern Minnesota. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you guys. Thank you.
How good is your Spanish before we get started here?
It's good enough to get married to a non-native English speaker. So 21 years later, we're still doing okay. So if that counts as a test.
That does count as a test. I'm also married to a non-native English speaker, and so but I guarantee your Spanish is way better than mine. Maybe we'll have to practice sometime.
We can have a Spanish duel after.
Totally, and then Rigel can just watch and say I have no idea what's going on.
I can say hola, and that's about it.
Exactly. Well, Matthew, thanks so much for joining us today. You've done a lot of work talking about topics, and I think maybe that's where I'd like to start. I think there's a bunch of different terms or words or themes that are bundled together in the idea of woke and wokeism and stuff. And you've actually done a great series, like a series of video lectures on wokeism or the progressivist worldview on Word on Fire. And so I would encourage anyone that's listening or watching to go and check that out. But for those who haven't, or for those who have no idea what woke actually means, and I know there's a lot of people out there who are in that category, can you help us sort of tackle what is woke? And when you use that terminology, and you've written about it a lot, what do you refer to when you say woke or wokeism?
Sure. So one thing that in the political and rhetorical battles that take place over this term, that often comes to the surface quickly for those who want to defend some version of it. They'll say, well, you're misusing the term woke because what woke really means is historically it has to do with the civil rights movement in the United States, but also globally in the 1960s, and it refers to a growing consciousness, being awake to the reality of systemic injustice against people of color and against African Americans in particular. And so they'll point to some texts from that time when the term was used, basically to mean wake up. To the problems that are staring us right in the face, and this grave injustice of racism. Well, fair enough. The term does have those roots, but one of the things that we see about progressive wokeism in its contemporary form is that what it does as an ideology is it will take terms and gut them, or sort of cut them open from below, and then stuff it with its toxic, poisonous ideology, with whatever meaning that the ideology wants to to give the term in order to advance its political purposes. So the fact that the term has those roots actually has nothing to do with its current usage and the current ideology that it embodies. And in fact, I would say it's antithetical, because the civil rights movement, in the 60s and beyond, had to do with the establishment of a colorblind society, a society that, as Martin Luther King Jr. put it, judges only on the content of one character and not the color of one's skin. And of course, progressive wokeism is the exact opposite of that. It's the imposition of racial ideology.
Matthew, my question about it is, like, it seems to not only, like, it's not made of single components, right? Like, it seems like it's ever evolving. Things are constantly changing. Like, how do we define an ideology which is like under constant evolution, which is constantly changing, and it doesn't seem to be consistent for very long?
It's like liquid almost. It feels like it's always morphing, and just like when you think it's gotten to like peak crazy, it feels like it's getting crazier. Yeah, that's a good point, Rigel.
That's not a bug in the system. That is the system. Is that it ascribes itself this power to shapeshift, and the reason is because it imposes, to use a fancy word, but I think it's actually helpful in this context, in an epistemological circle. So epistemology meaning in terms of what can be known, and the methodology we use to say that we know something or don't know it. So it opposes an epistemological circle around certain self-identified individuals who claim to be representing groups. Oftentimes do not represent those groups.
Totally.
But claim to be representing the groups. And based upon this ideology, they say things like our lived experience, and just pause there and think, what does it mean to have lived experience? It means that our way of perceiving the world, sheerly at the level of perception, not going beneath it to ask whether that perception is true or false, but how we actively experience the world is the truth. And you can't access it, non-group members, because you don't have our experience. And so by that formula right there, wokeism has set up a way of making truth claims, truth with big fat square quotes, that literally cannot be pinned down because it's dependent upon the subjective experience of the representative of politically privileged identity groups. And so by design, it can't be pinned down. And for that reason, it's so squirrely and impossible to sort of hold down and examine for any significant period of time.
Something that you just mentioned there that is this idea of like people speaking on behalf of others, potentially. And probably those people should not be speaking on behalf of those that they're purporting to speak on behalf of. And a hilarious example of that, I think, which is bundled into the woke worldview, if we can use that terminology, is one of the iterations of this, this flag that's plastered everywhere during a certain month of the year. And there's a color in the flag, and so like my wife is a Latina, and one of the colors in this, spectacularly multicolored flag supposedly represents her. And so it's like, I like to joke, it's like, well, they're speaking on your behalf. Like, my wife is deeply, deeply conservative, Catholic Christian, and she just like bristles at the fact that someone is purporting to speak on the exclusion or whatever it is that she does not feel, but is she's supposed to be very angry about. And I just think that's maybe a simple example of what you just mentioned there, Matthew. People speaking on behalf of others.
Yeah, it's speaking on behalf of others, not based upon the ideas that they hold or the belief systems that they ascribe to, but literally on superficial, immutable characteristics like what color your skin is, where you were born, what your native language is, what your what kind of attractions that you have. And so it's doubly insulting. It's not only saying, well, I'm going to speak on behalf of your ideas. So I'm going to speak on behalf of something that represents you independently of who you actually are in terms of the kind of person you choose to be. And so, yeah, I mean, it really is, even as we've just seen, what we like 5-10 minutes into this podcast, it's madness. It's absolute madness. And yet it has such a powerful grip on society. In the US, I think it's waning. It's not dead by any means, but it's waning. But it has such a powerful grip because it imposes such fear in those who come into contact with it, because you're very likely to get called a dirty name. And up until very recently, that could mean the loss of your livelihood.
That's exactly it. And I think Travis has personally experienced this. We've talked about this on the podcast before, and it's a genuine fear. Like, even while doing this podcast, it's, we have to constantly wonder, like, what doors are we closing by, like, speaking on this podcast about topics like this? And at some point we just have to say we don't care anymore. Like, we just got to do it. But it's a genuine fear for Catholics that are living out there in the secular world. Say like my wife is a HR professional, like, if she doesn't play along with this game, like that's her career over. It's like, especially for certain careers, there's a very real risk, and it's almost hard to believe the power that this ideology that has no real solid moral grounding has, like, taken over the world.
Yeah, it has. I mean, it's not the first time in history this has happened. It periodically happens. There's these, the French Revolution would be another paradigmatic example of this sort of mob form of thinking, and the political and moral consequences the murderous consequences that it can have. But it's especially, I think, potent now because of its particular mutation and because of the internet, because it can spread so quickly. And it did. It went from, compare like 2018 to 2021, right? In a 3-year period, the world had changed because of the explosion of this ideology online. And maybe it was a perfect storm because of COVID and because everybody was extra online. But it did rapidly change things. And I also want to say, it is a murderous ideology. I say that advisedly. I don't think that's hyperbole. Why? Because it literally depersonalizes people. It dehumanizes people. Depending upon your categorization within the particular group the ideology places you in, you are not a fully moral human. And the way that that's most apparent is the use of the term phobia. So when we hear transphobia, homophobia, any other phobia that you can get tagged with, well, what literally is a phobia? A phobia is an irrational fear. So by even using that term, this ideology has tagged you as at best mentally ill. At best mentally ill. And with mentally ill people, well, you don't reason with them, right? It's not like you can have a civil conversation with somebody who's a madman. So at best, the ideology is saying we need to have these people that have been tagged in this way segregated from the rest of society. But once you've dehumanized them at that level, it's just a few steps more to say these people are actually active threats. And the way we deal with active threats is we have to exterminate them. And you know what form that takes? Silence is violence. Oh, these people are actually violent. Why? Because they're silent. Well, self-defense. We need to take care of ourselves against those who are being violent against us in their silence. You see the formula? See how that works?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's extremely dangerous.
Wow. There's a whole bunch in there that I want to ask you about, but I want to speak to like an anecdotal story. Rigel mentioned like when I sort of faced down the woke mob, as it were, in a professional setting for basically just like speaking truth that the church has proclaimed on this gender ideology stuff. And the word that was used against me when I basically just declared that no, men are men, women are women. Like, okay, we're just going to leave it there, was the word bigot was used and something phobic, I think homophobic. And the hilarious thing about that is for anyone that takes 45 seconds to get to know me, you would know that I'm probably not phobic of almost anything. I'm grounded in, I hope, the church's teachings, and I'm principled, and I strive to live a virtuous life. But that doesn't mean I'm phobic in any sense. And the hilarious thing, especially about this issue, is I regularly have members of my wife's extended family over to our home. We break bread with them, we spend time with them, and they are same-sex attracted. And so people to declare that I'm phobic of a group without taking even 40 seconds to know my personal circumstances, well, I think that's part and parcel of this ideology where you can label someone, and almost just by the label you give them, they're instantly evil. And they ought not to be engaged with or anything. And I think we see that playing out constantly. And I don't know how we got here, but you're right, Matthew. I think we can look back and be like, it didn't seem like it was this bad a decade ago, and then it got this bad. What, for you, is there a specific point that maybe it was like the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter explosion, which was during COVID and stuff? Is there a point that you can point to specifically where like, this is when it got really bad, like it went over the ledge, as it were?
Yeah, it had been in the universities for decades.
Yeah.
So before I worked I started at Word on Fire. I was in a university, a Catholic university that unfortunately has completely lost its way, called Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California. And right before I left, they actually permitted a fundraiser for Planned Parenthood in St. Bellarmine College, the same building I used to have my office in. So just to give you a sense, and I want that publicly known that Loyola Marymount University allowed for Planned Parenthood to have a fundraiser on the university campus. And these ideas were already circulating and had quite a bit of power and influence within academic departments, within hiring decisions. And so it's sort of been building this kind of critical mass across the university system for decades. And I think this has a big part of it. Now, again, we're starting to see things turn a corner, but when you look at millions of students a year going through university systems where this ideology is already dominant, then you're already kind of creating this worldview that these people then, graduate, they get into HR positions, they get into corporate positions, and so the sort of the kindling was already all there. And then I think it was the events of COVID and the death of George Floyd that really was the spark that lit all that kindling. But that kindling had been building for decades. Travis, if I might, I also want to say, something that I find, because I used to do it, and so some unsolicited advice.
Yeah.
When we get given these names, our natural instinct is to be like, well, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Because here's the definition of this term, and here's my actual actions and behavior, and you'll see that they don't meet the definition of that term. Mm-hmm. That's presupposing that the person or mob that's calling you cares about either the definition of the term or whether or not you fit into that category.
Yeah.
And so actually defending ourselves when we become the victims of this ideology's mob behavior sort of feeds into it. It grants them authority.
Wow.
And so I think what I found the more effective response is just to say, you're a tyrant. You're at best you're a bully. At worst you're a tyrant. You are a threat to what is genuinely good and orderly and structured and just in society. And so I'm going to treat you as such. And I'm not advocating for violence. I'm just saying have the right perception, the accurate perception of the mob. The mob is not interested in accusing you of something and then listening as you testify and saying, well, okay, that's right. Don't grant the mob the authority of judge and jury, and because they'll also be executioner.
That's a great point, Matt, because I mean, if we just look at the St. Francis of Assisi prayer, right? We in that prayer, we ask for the grace to understand over being understood. And that is just not true of the woke mob, right? They have no interest in understanding.
Right.
And the contrast there is just so sharp because how do you discourse with a group that has no interest in discoursing, has no interest in actually listening to what you have to say? In fact, their priority is to silence you so that you can't say anything opposing to their, worldview.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're actively, it's a form of it literally is a form of violence. I mean, the ideology's goal is to extirpate you. It's to erase you. And so, we have to respond to it on those terms.
And I'd love to take the conversation there, Matt. You can speak from personal experience here. And most people, I think, listening have observed people facing things that you yourself have faced and you speak openly about or whatever. And most people look at something that you would have lived through, or even on a micro scale, what I've lived through, and be like, well, I just don't want that. So, and I think that leads to living in potentially a place of fear. Unfortunately, I think for lots of us Catholics, it leads to almost to the point of denying our faith, or at least certainly not doing what we're called to do, which is evangelize, share our faith, at least be open about it and declare our Lord, because they see what happens sometimes to those who grounded in the faith will speak openly against evils and everything. So given that that's certainly it's this cultural moment we're living through. You've lived through it. What have you found? You just gave some advice there. What other piece of advice would you have for those of us who face the woke mob, and what should we do to take strength, I guess, in those moments?
Well, two different things I think are important to keep in mind. One is our personal, our individual integrity, and there's always ways in which we have to choose our battles in the world, and and that includes even when the world sort of toxicity comes into our life. Is it really worth it for us to stand up and to resist it in such a way where we know there's going to be severe consequences? And they can be like superficial things like, are we going to allow our kids to have Netflix in the house? Like, are we going to allow our kids to watch this movie or not this movie? Right. So there's these kinds of things. We got rid of Disney Plus for like 4 years, and then we just allowed it to come back. So there's this constant sort of negotiation with the world, and so I'm not advocating a kind of like self-righteous piety and purity. We're always going to be mixed with the world as Christians, and we have to make the best decisions we can. At the same time, there's intrusions into our life that really do touch the core of our conscience. And I think this is one of them. I mean, if you're working in a place and you're working there surely out of fear, knowing that any given moment, somebody's going to say one of the magical taboo words and cast a spell, and then that could lead to you leaving your job. I think it's a question of integrity. Do you really want to stay there? Another thing to keep in mind is none of us are safe. So the woke mob, and I think again the French Revolution is sort of a paradigmatic example of how this plays out in real time. It's like the people who think that they're safe because they're the ones who have trumpeted it end up being the victim of it eventually. Those who keep their heads down at best are just biding their time for when they do get quote unquote discovered. So it's kind of like, you know what? We don't choose who is this Tolkien, right? We don't choose the times we live in, but we do choose how we respond to them. And it's like, these are the times we live in. Do we wish it were different? Absolutely. But this problem is not going to go away on its own. No one's going to come save you. And so it's either capitulate and be harmed and your family be harmed and those you care about be harmed, or find a way to fight back.
Matt, you've done this entire lecture series on wokeism. I'm curious because, let's try and be charitable. Is there anything valid about this ideology? Like, is there any kind of upside, anything that you agree with?
No. So let me contextualize that. If you'd asked me that question a few years ago, I would have said something like, you know what, it's misguided, but at least it has a sense of the importance of justice and the recognition that there are, I have to use the words here very, very carefully because they're oftentimes twisted, but there are systemic issues that could be improved with more attention to the nature of the problems and a more effective collective response to them. Okay, that fine. And the Catholic social thought tradition has always recognized that, with the major caveat that all collective sin ultimately has its roots in individual sin and sinners. That the collective sin doesn't have the sort of independent metaphysical existence. It always tied down to the choices that individuals make. So fine. The reason I don't grant that sort of common ground anymore is because this ideology has had time to play itself out. We've seen people in power have acted according to this ideology. And so it's no longer a theoretical battle between, does this make sense? What are some possible good motives in it? I'll be honest about the bad motives. It's like, well, let's see what this produced. Right. And it produces chaos. It destroys the very groups that the ideology claims to care about the most. And it destroys civic order. It permits, the people on the street to die with festering wounds because of drug addiction in the name of advocacy for the homeless. So it's had its chance, and it's shown unsurprisingly to those of us who are paying attention, it's shown itself to be a destructive force. So, no grace. It's like having grace for communism. It's like no, you don't get a grace. You don't get like. I'm not arguing with Karl Marx.
Yeah.
I'm arguing with Stalin.
Yeah.
We see what happens when you do this.
Right.
Yeah. And something in where Rigel and I live in Canada, and I don't know if you've heard about this, Matthew, but in the last few years, there's tied to this woke movement has been the discovery allegedly, and now we know it's non-discovery of hundreds of graves from Catholic-run schools and stuff. And since that happened in the last coming up on 4 years, there's been more than 100 churches, most of them Catholic churches, across Canada that have been vandalized, desecrated, or burned to the ground. And even the cathedral here in Calgary, where Rigel and I live, last year at one point, going to Mass, someone had shot bullets at the front door of the cathedral. Doesn't even make the news. No one talks about it. Like some version of, well, it's acceptable because. And it's acceptable because the prevailing woke narrative is so powerful that people are literally afraid to step up and be like, no, violence is always wrong. Like, within a Catholic worldview, I understand that there is just war theory, but unchecked violence, just doing violence because I'm upset about something, so I'm going to literally shoot bullets at your place of worship because I'm upset about something that I haven't investigated myself or whatever, and it's just acceptable. And I think it couldn't be acceptable if the woke worldview hadn't become so dominant. And the reason I think that to me is very disconcerting, because that's happening in our otherwise not violent city whatsoever, is to what you've talked about, Matthew, which is the French Revolution. If we look back now several hundred years, most of us have forgotten, I think. We probably learned it in junior high school, but the French Revolution was horrific. Like, it is And so for those who have only heard what the French Revolution is and don't really understand it, can you shed a little light on how bad things can get in what was a Catholic country?
Yeah, well, think about it's helpful in many ways, but I think one of the first ways, think about like liberté, égalité, fraternité, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's like, oh, well, who's against those things? Diversity, equity, inclusion. Yeah. Who's against those things? Like, those are just like, those are great civic virtues. That if you're against that, there's definitely something wrong with you. Yeah. So that sets us down the path, right? So we identify these sort of terms that on the surface look like you would be either crazy or evil if you were to oppose them. So you've already established that kind of that first dividing line. Whether don't ask questions about liberty, fraternity, and equality, right? Yeah. And then within that, you see the destruction of order, and ultimately the rule of the mob. And so, in the name of justice, in the name of a perceived and certainly it's to some level real social problems, the mob comes together and then wields its power in the name of virtue to determine who's on the side of the good and who's on the side of evil, and it very quickly devolves into violence. Yeah, it's kind of a genocidal movement. I'm not saying that that's in the sense that's actually what happened. Yeah. Either in the French Revolution, certainly not in our context. It has not happened, but in terms of it marks certain groups as unhuman, dehumanized, unhuman. And so once you've done that, you've now authorized everything, and then it becomes a logistical question of how you respond to the dehumanized. Yeah. I would encourage a cursory study of the French Revolution to see how this kind of thing can end.
Yeah. And maybe, Rigel, before I let you ask a follow-up question, I think and I know you know a lot about this, Matthew, you wrote a great article for Word on Fire. Shortly thereafter, in France, the opening ceremonies of the Paris Olympics, which is, coming up on a year ago from when we're recording this. And I mean, it's just like, it's shocking to me, the level of denial by the organizers and stuff. And then you still can't find the footage online on NBC's website or anything of what was obviously mocking the Catholic faith on the world stage, and it's coming out of this woke worldview, and it's just like that's not violence per se, but it's just like the idea that you can just mock a world religion so publicly because it stands for things that you perceive as standing against whatever you are. It's just like we've gotten here. Like we're not imagining this, and I think that's it would be in France where that happens.
Yeah, and of course it's instructive that it's the Christianity that's targeted. I mean, Christians, we by nature, in terms of having imbibed the truths of our faith, are not violent people. We do not believe in engaging problems in the world with violence. There's layer after layer after layer of restrictions before violence can be used, and it's into that, Travis, like you just said, it's into the just war theory. And if for those who really do read just war theory, you see it's so narrow. It's real. It's narrow. But it's narrow. And the same with self-defense. Like, so the conditions for self-defense, like even if somebody's attacking, your goal is still not to kill the person. Your goal is to defend the sanctity of your own life. But if that can be done in a way that's not lethal, that's what you're supposed to do. So that's part of who we are, right? The secular world has always known that about Christians, and so we really are a very easy target because we have this very high threshold for fighting back. However, at the same time, we have to ask ourselves, do we really want to? It's one thing for me to turn the other cheek. It's another thing when somebody starts slapping your kid. So it's narrow, but there is a justified grounds for resisting aggression. And so I think that there's no reason that Christians, we should have a very high tolerance for mockery, because the world will mock us always, and mock Christ. Right? We're going into Holy Week right now. But once that mockery crosses over into actual oppression, then we're justified in resisting by all moral means necessary.
Mm-hmm. Matt, I want to ask a question, like, first of all, about, let's relate this to young people. Like, what is it that fundamentally attracts them to this ideology? Like, people are generally looking for a sense of belonging. Like, if you were to, break it down into first principles, like, would it be like a victim mentality, entitlement? And then as a second part to that question, how can we, as a church, do a better job of making young people feel welcome with us rather than going this way?
So a couple things come to mind. One, I was giving a lecture last night on different forms of belief in God, and we were talking about, in particular, New Ageism versus Catholicism was one of the comparisons we were doing. And one way I thought about thinking about New Ageism, it's like all the benefits of religion with none of the responsibilities, and so it's like you get to hook up with religion, but otherwise, don't have to get married to it. Well, I think wokeism is like you get to hook up with virtue, but don't have to have any responsibilities. So you get the whole rush of feeling like you're on the side of the gods, like you have some kind of moral purpose in life, but none of the responsibility of doing any of the kind of very slow and careful and arduous work of figuring out what's really going on and what are my beliefs really, and where do they come from, and do they make any sense? So it gives this sort of rush, and that's what kids. That's what we do when we're young, right? We like sort of immediate gratification, and so this sort of fits the immediate gratification of feeling like we're fighting a good fight, but without real risk. Something else that's happening though in real time. I don't know if it's happening in Canada. I imagine it is that young men in particular are en masse rejecting this ideology. I mean, it's like fallen off a cliff. Meanwhile, young women, it continues they see an upward trend. So this is like the devil's paradise here, where men and women, think back to the garden, are now separating as groups. That's bad. But it's at least good that young men in particular, and in a sense, it's no surprise, because if you have an ideology that says your existence is toxic and dehumanizing, eventually the people who are being called toxic will be like, we'll look elsewhere for our worldview. Thank you. And so it is appealing to youth, but even with that, we're seeing a split.
And I think what you just explained, Matthew, sort of, I think, partially also explains the popularity of Jordan Peterson. I've heard him described as like the gateway drug to Christianity, and everything. But Jordan Peterson is from the same part of the world that I'm from. Like, he's born and raised in Alberta. I'm born and raised in Alberta. His wife is a recent convert to the Catholic faith. Jordan Peterson also, I'm a student. I'm finishing my master's degree in theology at the University of Toronto. And so I was there when Jordan Peterson very publicly left the University of Toronto, largely over reasons tied to the woke world. Like, he refused to pander to the gender ideology, gender pronoun nonsense that is part and parcel of this woke worldview and stuff. And so I think, Jordan Peterson presents an attractive narrative in many respects to specifically young men. I think, to your point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, having said that, he's not a Catholic. Pray for him, God willing, he'll get there. And so, what we as men, Catholic men, trying to witness to our culture, what are things that you yourself maybe, especially when you think about your own children and stuff, how are you trying to practically live a virtuous life, grounded in Christ's church and everything, that presents it in a way that's attractive to people that are otherwise attracted to the virtue signaling of like the woke worldview, which is all it is. At best, it's that.
Yeah. The first thing that we try to do is to have a healthy sacramental life. So that just not only includes going to Mass every Sunday, going to Mass to the extent we can more than just on Sundays.
Yeah.
Going to confession on a regular basis. We pray almost every night, not every night, but almost every night as a family. We'll do a Divine Mercy. Occasionally we'll do a Rosary. And so the hope is that, and I think it's a justified hope, is that having a healthy spiritual life will help us to navigate these onslaughts of problems that come in from outside the home into the home. And so that's where I'd say that we can all start, is because that is under our control. So much of this is actually not under our control, or if it is under our control, it's not always clear how exactly prudently we should deal with it. But that our spiritual life is under our control, not the graces we receive, but our willingness to open ourselves to them. So always start there. Jordan Peterson's way of putting this is, clean our own rooms first.
Right.
So let's make sure that our houses, to the extent it's possible, are well ordered and healthy internally. Externally, it really becomes a battle of prudence. Let me give a good example. So our son is 17, soon to be 18. He's been going to college next year, and the colleges that we've looked at are. All of them have strong elements of this ideology that there's still reservoirs of it there.
Yeah.
And yet there's elements of it that are very promising and very attractive, and we think are very healthy and would be very beneficial to our son. So our question that we discussed, my wife and I, with our son, is like, to what degree are we willing to take the risk of you being in the presence of an ideology that is toxic, that sees you as a problem? But there's also these good elements as well. And I think that all families have to kind of negotiate that on their own. And these are Catholic universities we're talking about. so
Catholic,
yeah, exactly.
Catholic universities, yeah.
And we went to one Catholic university, which I won't name my name, but it's like heaven on earth. It's like everything's perfect there, but there's 500 students, and it's in a field. So it's like, I don't think that's good for our son. It could be good for some people. So I would just say exercise prudence, knowing that it's not going to be perfect. So get perfect off the table in your engagement with the world, and say, what's the best we can do in this particular decision that we're making in negotiating with the world, while protecting your own conscience.
I think one thing you've outlined there, Matt, is like the importance, at least when it comes to our own kids, the importance of forming them really early, right? Like, so giving them a basis in the faith, because at least it anchors them. Because one thing I don't think we can realistically do is insulate them forever. Like, Yeah,
No.
right now it's the college phase, and then they're going to go into the secular world to work probably because there aren't, let's be frank, like there aren't enough jobs in the Catholic economy, let's call it, for everyone to be doing that. So like you are going to go out into the secular world, you are going to deal with these issues. And if you don't have that basis in faith before you go out there, then you're going to struggle, right? Like that's going to become a problem. But I also think there's a very real danger of like young men who are looking for another group to belong to. There are other people out there besides Jordan Peterson, like Andrew Tate. He presents a very appealing narrative for young men as well. So when it comes to things like that, which is maybe the opposite end of the spectrum, like how do we draw people away from that towards what is true, good, and beautiful?
I think what Andrew Tate, I'm sure you heard the term toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Right? And I used to think like, oh, that's just a completely invented term. It doesn't really, I've never met anybody that could even possibly fit within this category. And then I become aware of Andrew Tate, like, oh, okay, I see the point. It's like, oh, that's toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
It's taking the virtues of masculinity and orienting them towards destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one way that one insight we can gain from this is men, surprise, surprise, common sense now has become revolutionary. It's like, G.K. Chesterton pointed out how many decades ago, but like boys want adventure, boys want challenge, boys want, in a proper sense, a conflict to overcome. Mm-hmm. The way that has typically played out historically in relatively healthy ways, of course there's exceptions to it, is that men should see themselves as, especially with relation to women, as seeking to be protectors, as seeking to be the source in the family that's willing to take all the sacrifices necessary for the good of the mother of the family and the children of the family. And I don't want to push this too far, but sort of the knight ideal, right? And so that's a healthy way of channeling that desire to be a leader. And I'm not going down the trad route here either, where like there's this thing online now, like Instagram, like trad wives, or like getting a job is like evil or something like that. It's like, God, just when you think you've sort of stabilized things, it's like this mutant pops over here. You're like, no, not that. That's not what we're talking about. Yeah. It's like it's a sin to work outside of that. It's like, what? No. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about men have a natural desire, I would say, inscribed in us by God to be providers and protectors. And so let's channel that. When people think of Catholicism, they think of strong men, physically strong to the extent that that's possible, but morally strong men who are just not going to allow their families to be trampled upon. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I think there's just something that's deeply ingrained in all of us. Like if we actually think about it, I have yet to meet a man that I've had a conversation with on honest terms where they don't in some way, shape, or form desire to be a provider and protector for their family, right? And so I think the Catholic intellectual tradition offers that as an option if it's properly understood. I think there's a lot of people that don't properly explain it so that many people don't realize that is available within the faith, sadly. Has that been your experience too, Matthew?
Oh, totally. Totally. Yeah, especially with the incentivizing of stupid forms of Catholicism by creating a group online, right?
Yeah.
By becoming outrageous in the other way.
Yeah.
It's incentivized because that's what generates the most clicks and gets you buzz and things like that. But it's not like the church doesn't teach something that's very sane and solid and easy to understand. It's just that its presentation of it, you're right, is all over the place online. So it takes some patience to find the actual orthodoxy within the mess. Yeah.
Maybe before we, because we're coming up to the end of our time with you, Matthew, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask your view insofar as because like we mentioned earlier, the woke movement is liquid and it's ever evolving and you can never pin it down. Where do you see it going? I get the sense, Rigel and I have talked about this. We've had other people sort of anecdotally share that they feel like we're past quote unquote peak woke. I read an article in The Economist that did an analysis for the use of terminology associated with woke, kind of peaked in late 2021, 2022, and it's dropped, at least in corporate environments from there, but it hasn't gone away, obviously. So, whether we're at peak woke or past it, from your perspective, where do you see this going in the years ahead?
I think there's going to be either, and I think we'll be able to see this empirically. There will be societies, maybe even entire countries, that wake up from being woke and turn the ship away from the waterfall.
Yeah.
But it's scary for me to say this. I think there's some countries that are so far gone. They're so far down this path.
Yeah.
And the ruling class is so stuffed with individuals who still will. I mean, they'd rather watch everything burn down.
Wow.
than reform.
Wow.
There's the possibility that it will hollow out. I mean, if we look at historically at countries and societies, like, they're stable for a while, they're prosperous for a while, and then they fall apart. This is Saint Augustine, one of his many great insights in the City of God is that every society on its own terms, secular society, has the seeds of its own destruction within it.
Yeah.
And it can take 10 years, it can take 1,000 years, but it's going to fall apart. So I think some societies, I think especially those that have had fewer Western values are probably in a better place. Western values are probably in a better place to weather this storm.
Yeah.
But I fear for Europe.
Yeah.
I'll be honest,
Totally.
friends. I fear for Canada.
Yeah.
I fear for Canada.
You and me both.
I'm like, Canada?
Yeah.
What do you, this is always like the Americans' idea of if we just got our act straight, we'd be like Canada.
Matthew,
and now Canada seems like a dystopia from a lot of the stuff that I read.
If I'm going to confirm what you just said, Matthew, it's not just perception, and I will say, admittedly, anecdotally, but there are multiple people in my circle, many of whom are not religious whatsoever, and they're waking up, to use that term, waking up to how have we gotten here? Several of whom came here as refugees and have gone back to the countries they came from.
Yeah,
quite exactly. Say that. Yeah, say that out loud. It's that's nuts. But that's where we are, and so I think, your observation is one that is shared by both Rigel and I. Rigel.
Yeah, there are indicators that things are calming down. Like, if we take a look at, I think it was Snow White in the box office, and I think it got an IMDb rating of 1.6 or something, maybe the worst movie of all time. And then you see the comments on posts about that, and it's just go woke, go broke, right? And so people are getting behind this idea, and they're just tired of it, I think. But you know what you said about countries that don't have Western values, I think you're absolutely right, actually. My wife and I just spent 2 months in Thailand, and we felt insulated from all of this nonsense. Honestly, you'll see a pride flag here and there, but it's not so bad. I actually saw one video once that Thailand is very popular for sex change surgeries and stuff. But the thing about that is, over there, common sense hasn't been lost. People might get the surgery and know that they are not the opposite sex just because they got the surgery, right? And then they won't push that ideology on other people as if you have to believe it too. It's a personal decision. And while that's not a good thing, it's at least better than a virus that spreads throughout civilization.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There's always going to be strange behavior. There'll always be strange behavior. And there's a certain degree of toleration that's just necessary as kind of a social lubricant for societies to function. But once it becomes dominant and then evangelized, right, then that's where the danger is. And I think that's a great point, is that the world as a whole looks at the West and justifiably thinks we've lost our mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've talked about things like this, and this is where I want to bring us to wrap the conversation, is you having a chance to plug your work and the work that you do at Word on Fire, because I quite honestly, I look at Word on Fire as kind of like a beacon of light in the, it's not white, maybe rubble yet, but it's in the collapsing infrastructure of Western civilization, which is how it feels like. And I think Word on Fire is doing amazing things. Bishop Barron, I don't know the full story of what led him to start Word on Fire, but I think it was 25 years ago. You guys just celebrated 25 years, and we are so grateful for it. And there's so many people that have benefited from it. So, Matthew, maybe talk us through a little bit about what you're doing at Word on Fire, and either your work specifically or Word on Fire at large, and what plans might be for the future.
Sure, yeah, I'll be happy to. Thanks for that plug. So I oversee what's called the Word on Fire Institute, which is the formation arm of the ministry that Bishop Barron founded and continues, of course, to be a central part of. And the Institute, we're close to 30,000 members now, and the goal of the Institute, it's an online community. I like to call it a digital city of God, and there we seek to be a place that provides ongoing interactive formation opportunities in lots of different kinds of ways, including communities, including courses. We're building a certification program. We now have a master's program. And the goal is not just to have kind of this insular online bubble where we come together and we're in community. That's fine, and that's in fact good. That's borne very good fruit. But it's a base, and the purpose of a base is not to stay on the base. It's to go out into the world. And so what's really important to Word on Fire, and what's really important to me, and why I'm so proud to be a part of it, is that it holds on to that evangelical dimension of the faith. We are not a private religion. We are a public religion that is going to go into the mess of the world, find points of contact where it's possible, push back when it's necessary, but otherwise proclaim the gospel everywhere, recognizing that, as our CEO has put it, evangelization is inherently dangerous and always will be. And so what we hope is we're finding a training grounds, as it were, for evangelists across the world.
Yeah, and I think I love that. I'd never heard that before, that evangelization is inherently dangerous. But I think all you have to do is look at the first followers of Christ, his apostles, and what happened.
I would just like to recognize as well our brothers and sisters in Nigeria, for example, one of many places where their churches are full and they're being bombed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So whatever problems we got here in the West, we're not being bombed. We're not being kidnapped. And so let that be a source of shame for us. Yeah. Not only that we're not doing more to support our Christian brothers and sisters, Catholic brothers and sisters, but that we're also timid because somebody might call us a dirty name.
Totally. Well, thanks, Matthew, for coming on here, sharing your insights and stuff, articulating things much more eloquently than I do when I'm just flustered by woke insanity, and I think people who have listened to this should look you up, find your work. You've done a bunch of writing on this topic, and it's been really insightful for me as I think through messy circumstances in workplaces and school settings and stuff. And you've helped me make sense of the chaos, which is, you've used that word. I think that's exactly what it is. So yeah, anyone that's listened to this, please do follow Matthew. We'll put a link in the show notes to where you can find his work and support people like him that are doing what our culture needs on the front lines at, admittedly sometimes high personal cost, whether professionally or even personally. So yeah, thank you, Matthew, for that. Rigel, do you want to wrap us up in a quick prayer here?
For sure. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father in heaven, we give you thanks and praise. Thank you for the gift of your truth, of beauty and goodness. Though we are so undeserving, you give to us so freely. We pray today for all those who are working to spread the truth of the Gospels throughout the world. Strengthen them, grant them courage, and give them faith above all that you are with them, just as you have always been with your faithful followers, even through periods of suffering. We ask all this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, friends.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Thanks, Rigel, for the prayer. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in. This has been another episode of Coffee, Commerce, and Catechesis. God bless you all.
God bless.